Right then, let's get stuck into it. You've probably heard the term drylining knocking about, especially if you're thinking about doing a bit of home improvement or even watching us on DIY SOS. But what exactly is it? Well, in simple terms, drylining is a way of creating internal walls and ceilings using boards, usually plasterboard. These boards are fixed to a frame, which could be timber studs or a lightweight metal framework. Think of it like building a smooth, paint-ready surface without all the faff and drying time of traditional wet plastering. It's a game changer for many projects, and it's something you can definitely get your head around with a bit of guidance. The beauty of drylining and why it's become so popular is its speed and convenience. Instead of applying several coats of wet plaster and waiting for each one to dry perfectly, which can take days, even weeks in damp British weather, you're putting up pre-made sheets. This dry process means you can move on to decorating much quicker. No more staring at damp patches, wondering when you can finally get the wallpaper up or slap on a coat of paint. It also provides a consistently flat and true surface, which can sometimes be tricky to achieve with hand-applied plaster, especially if you're not a seasoned pro with a trowel. Another great thing about drylining is its versatility. It's not just about creating a flat wall. You can use it to improve insulation by incorporating insulating material behind the boards. You can enhance soundproofing, which is brilliant if you've got noisy neighbors or teenagers with a drum kit. You can even increase a room's fire resistance by using specific types of plasterboard. So it's more than just a surface, it's a system that can really boost the performance and comfort of your home. It's a modern building method that offers practical solutions to common household needs, making spaces more comfortable and functional for everyone. So, to sum it up, drylining is essentially an internal cladding system. It uses boards, most commonly plasterboard, fixed to a frame. This method replaces traditional wet plastering techniques like sand and cement rendering or gypsum plaster applied directly to brickwork. The term dry is key here. It highlights the minimal use of water in the construction process, leading to faster completion times and less mess. It's a straightforward concept, but one that has revolutionized how we build and renovate interiors, making it accessible for DIYers to achieve professional-looking results much more easily. Now, you might think drylining is a brand new invention, something cooked up in a lab last week, but you'd be surprised. Plasterboard, the heart of drylining, has actually been around for a fair old while. The story starts way back in the late 19th century, across the pond in America. Augustine Sackett and Fred Kane patented something called Sackett board in 1894. This was essentially layers of paper felt held together with a thin layer of plaster, a bit like a plaster sandwich. It wasn't quite the plasterboard we know today, but it was the granddaddy of it all, the first step on the journey. This early plasterboard was initially intended as a backing material for conventional wet plaster, to give it something to stick to and to reduce the amount of wet stuff needed. But people soon realized its potential as a surface material in its own right. The United States Gypsum Company, or USG, bought Sackett's company in the early 1900s and started refining the product. They introduced paper-faced boards, which were stronger and easier to finish. By the time of the First World War, plasterboard was starting to gain traction, seen as a quicker and more efficient building material, especially when labor was scarce. It really took off in the post-World War II building boom. There was a massive need for new housing, and quickly. Traditional building methods were just too slow to meet the demand. Plasterboard, or drywall as it's often called in the States, offered a fantastic solution. It allowed builders to put up internal walls rapidly, speeding up the whole construction process. Here in the UK, it took a little longer to become mainstream. We Brits can be a bit traditional, can't we? We loved our wet plaster, but gradually the benefits of drylining speed, ease of use, and improved insulation possibilities became undeniable. So, while it might feel like a modern marvel, drylining has a history stretching back over a century. It evolved from a simple backing board into the sophisticated building system we use today. It's been tried and tested, refined and improved over decades. It's a testament to good old-fashioned ingenuity, adapting to the needs of the time. From its humble beginnings in America to becoming a staple in construction worldwide, including here in good old Blighty, drylining has certainly earned its place in the builder's toolkit. It's a proper workhorse material, that's for sure. Ever wondered how those big flat sheets of plasterboard are actually made? It's quite a clever process really, a bit like making a giant continuous sandwich. The main ingredient, as the name suggests, is gypsum. Gypsum is a soft sulfate mineral that's mined from the earth. It's a naturally occurring rock and we've got plenty of it. Sometimes synthetic gypsum, which is a byproduct from processes like flue gas desulfurization in power plants, is also used. This is great because it means we're recycling and making use of materials that might otherwise go to waste. So it starts with this raw gypsum. The raw gypsum is first crushed into a fine powder. Then it's heated to remove most of its water content in a process called calcining. This transforms it into what's known as hemihydrate gypsum plaster, or plaster of Paris. You might have used that for crafts. This powder is then mixed with water again, along with a few other bits and bobs. These additives can include things like starch for adhesion, paper pulp or fiberglass for strength, and foaming agents to reduce the density and weight of the final board. This creates a slurry, a sort of thick, paste-like mixture, ready for the next stage of its journey. This gypsum slurry is then fed continuously between two thick sheets of special paper liner. Imagine a massive toothpaste tube squeezing out its contents onto a moving conveyor belt with paper rolling out above and below it. The paper acts as the bread in our sandwich, encasing the gypsum core. As it moves along the production line, the board is formed to the correct thickness and width. The edges are also shaped at this point, often to create a tapered edge, which helps when it comes to jointing the boards later on. It's a continuous ribbon of plasterboard, quite an impressive sight to see in a factory. Finally, this long, continuous board travels along a setting belt where the gypsum core begins to harden and bond with the paper liners. Once it's set sufficiently but not completely dry, it's cut into standard lengths, those familiar 8x4 sheets or other sizes. These cut boards are then sent through massive dryers, which are like giant ovens, to remove any remaining excess moisture. This drying process is carefully controlled to ensure the boards are strong and stable. After drying, they're trimmed, stacked and bundled up, ready to be shipped off to building sites and DIY stores, ready for you to get your hands on them. Right, let's talk about the most common type of plasterboard you'll come across. Standard plasterboard. This is your bread and butter board, the workhorse of the dry lining world. You'll see it everywhere, from new builds to home renovations. It usually has an ivory-coloured paper face on one side, which is the side you decorate, and a greyish paper on the back. It's designed for general use in walls and ceilings where you don't need any fancy special properties like extra fire resistance or moisture protection. It's straightforward, reliable, and does the job perfectly well for most situations in your home. Standard plasterboard typically comes in a few different thicknesses. The most common ones you'll find are 9.5 millimeters, often called 3/8 of an inch in old money, and 12.5 millimeters, which is half an inch. The 9.5 millimeter board is a bit lighter and often used for ceilings or for curved surfaces, as it has a bit more flex. The 12.5 millimeter board is more rigid and robust, making it a better choice for walls as it provides a more solid feel and better impact resistance. You can also get 15 millimeter boards for even greater strength and sound insulation, but 12.5 millimeters is the go-to for most wall applications in domestic settings. The edges of standard plasterboard are also important. Most boards come with tapered edges on their longest sides. This means the edges are slightly thinner than the main body of the board. This taper creates a shallow recess when two boards are butted up against each other. This recess is then filled with jointing compound and covered with jointing tape to create a seamless, invisible join. You can also get square-edged boards, which are butted together tightly, but these are often used when the entire surface is going to be skim-coated with a thin layer of plaster, rather than just jointed. One of the best things about standard plasterboard is its versatility and ease of use. It's relatively lightweight, especially compared to traditional building blocks or wet plaster. It's easy to cut to size using a sharp Stanley knife. You just score one side, snap it, and then cut through the paper on the other side. Fixing it is straightforward too, usually with special drywall screws into timber or metal studs. It provides a lovely smooth surface that's ready for decorating once it's been properly jointed or skimmed. It's a real DIY-friendly material that can help you transform a space without too much fuss. Now, standard plasterboard is great for most jobs, but sometimes you need something a bit more specialized. That's where the other members of the plasterboard family come in. Builders and DIYers have different needs, and manufacturers have developed boards to tackle specific challenges. For instance, if you're working in a room that's likely to get a bit steamy, like a bathroom or a kitchen, you'll want to look at moisture-resistant plasterboard. These boards usually have a green paper facing and contain special additives in their core that help repel moisture and prevent damp problems. They're not fully waterproof, mind you, so for shower areas you'd still need proper tanking, but they're much better than standard board in humid conditions. Then there's fire-resistant plasterboard, often called fireboard or pink plasterboard, because of its pink paper facing. This type of board has glass fibers and other additives mixed into its gypsum core. These additions help the board maintain its integrity for longer when exposed to fire, slowing down the spread of flames and protecting the structure behind it. You'll often see fire-resistant plasterboard specified in building regulations for certain areas, like around boilers, on walls, separating a garage from the house, or in blocks of flats to protect escape routes. It gives precious extra minutes for people to get out safely in an emergency, so it's a really important material. If noise is your enemy, perhaps you live near a busy road or next door to aspiring rock stars, then acoustic plasterboard is your friend. These boards are denser than standard plasterboard and are designed to reduce sound transmission between rooms. They often have a blue or purple paper facing. The higher mass helps to block airborne sound, and some types might have a more flexible core to dampen vibrations. Using acoustic plasterboard, perhaps in combination with acoustic insulation in the stud cavity, can make a massive difference to how peaceful your home feels. It's great for home cinemas, music rooms, or just creating quieter bedrooms. There are even other specialist boards out there, like impact-resistant boards for high-traffic areas, such as hallways or schools, or thermal plasterboards that come with a layer of insulation already bonded to the back. These insulated boards are brilliant for improving the energy efficiency of older homes with solid walls, as they add insulation and a new wall surface in one go. So, you see, it's not just one size fits all. There's a whole range of plasterboards designed to solve specific problems and make our buildings safer, quieter, warmer, and more comfortable. Choosing the right one is key to a successful project. So we've met the different types of plasterboard, but how do they really stack up against each other? Let's do a bit of a comparison. Standard plasterboard, your basic ivory-faced board, is the cheapest and most readily available. It's perfectly adequate for most internal walls and ceilings in dry areas of your home. Its main job is to provide a smooth surface for decoration. It offers a little bit of fire resistance and sound insulation just by its nature, but nothing compared to the specialized boards. If your needs are simple and your budget is tight, standard board is usually the way to go. Moisture-resistant plasterboard, the green one, is a step up in price from standard board. Its key difference is the silicone and other water-repellent additives in its core and paper liner. This makes it suitable for areas with intermittent high humidity like bathrooms, but not directly in shower cubicles without tanking, utility rooms and kitchens. It won't crumble or degrade as quickly as standard board if it gets a bit damp. However, it's not designed for constant soaking. Its fire and acoustic properties are generally similar to standard board unless it's a special hybrid type. It's a sensible upgrade for specific rooms. Fire-resistant plasterboard, the pink board, is generally more expensive than both standard and moisture-resistant types. Its main selling point is its enhanced fire protection, thanks to those glass fibers and other additives in its core. This means it can resist fire for longer periods, typically 30 minutes or 60 minutes, depending on the board thickness and system it's part of. This is crucial for safety in certain situations. It's usually denser than standard board, which also gives it slightly better acoustic performance, but its primary function is fire safety. You use this where building regulations demand it, or where you want extra peace of mind. Acoustic plasterboard, often blue or purple, is typically one of the pricier options. Its higher density is the key difference, designed specifically to reduce sound transmission. Some acoustic boards also have a specially formulated core that helps to dampen sound vibrations. While fireboard offers a bit of a sound improvement due to its density, dedicated acoustic board performs much better for noise control. If you're serious about soundproofing a room, this is the board you need, often used in layers or as part of a specific soundproofing system. Each board has its place, and the choice depends entirely on the specific requirements of your project and, of course, your budget. All right, you've chosen your plasterboard. Now, how do you get it fixed up on the wall or ceiling? The most common method for fixing plasterboard is to screw it to a timber or metal stud frame. You'll need special drywall screws for this. These screws have a bugle head, which means they countersink themselves slightly into the board without tearing the paper face. This creates a little dimple that can easily be filled with jointing compound later. You need to make sure the screws are long enough to go through the board and get a good fixing into the stud, usually about 25 millimeters into timber or 10 millimeters into metal. When you're screwing the boards up, spacing is important. For walls, screws are typically spaced about 300 millimeters apart along the line of each stud and about 150 to 200 millimeters apart at the edges of the board. For ceilings, you'll need them a bit closer, say 200 to 250 millimeters apart in the main body of the board and 150 millimeters at the edges, because gravity is always trying to pull them down. Make sure the screws are driven in straight and don't go too deep, as this can crush the gypsum core and weaken the fixing. A drywall screw gun with a depth stop is a brilliant tool for this, ensuring every screw is perfect. Another method of fixing, particularly to solid masonry walls like brick or blockwork, is called dot and dab or direct bonding. This involves sticking the plasterboard directly to the wall using dabs of special plasterboard adhesive. You mix up the adhesive, put big dollops of it on the back of the board or on the wall, and then press the board firmly into place, using a long spirit level to get it plumb and flat. This method is quicker than building a stud frame if the existing wall is reasonably sound and not too uneven. It also helps to improve thermal insulation slightly by creating an air gap. Before you even think about fixing any boards, preparation is key, as with any DIY job. Make sure your framing is straight, level and secure. If you're fixing to existing walls, ensure they are clean, dry and free from any loose material. Plan your board layout to minimize joints and waste. Usually you fix boards horizontally on walls, landscape style, and try to stagger the joints between courses, a bit like brickwork. Taking the time to prepare properly will make the actual dry lining process much smoother and give you a much better finished result. A bit of planning goes a long way, trust me on that. Right, you're getting the hang of this dry lining business. Before you rush off and start covering every wall in sight, let me share a few extra tips that US old hands have learned over the years. First things first, measure twice, cut once. It's an old saying, but it's golden, especially with big sheets of plasterboard. A mistake can be costly and create unnecessary waste. Use a good quality tape measure and a long straight edge, like a T-square, for marking your cuts. A sharp Stanley knife is your best friend for cutting plasterboard. Score firmly, then snap. Change the blade regularly for clean cuts. When you're handling plasterboard, be careful. Those big 8x4 sheets, that's 2.4 meters by 1.2 meters, can be heavy and awkward, especially if you're working on your own. Get a mate to help you lift and position them if you can. If you're on your own, there are tools like board lifters that can help, especially for ceilings. Also, remember that plasterboard doesn't like getting wet unless it's the moisture-resistant type, and even then, within limits. Store your boards flat in a dry place, off the floor if possible, to prevent them from warping or getting damaged before you even start. Don't skimp on fixings. Use the correct type and length of drywall screws for your board thickness and stud material, and use enough of them. If you don't use enough screws or space them too far apart, the boards can warp or crack later on, and you'll get a rubbish finish. When screwing, aim to create that slight dimple, but don't break the paper. If you do accidentally drive a screw too deep and tear the paper, remove it and put another one in nearby. That torn paper won't hold properly, and it'll cause problems when you come to jointing or skimming. A really useful tip for getting clean internal corners is to fix the board on one side of the corner first, letting it run slightly past the stud. Then, when you fix the board on the adjoining wall, butt it up tight against the face of the first board. This gives you a really solid, well-supported corner that's much easier to tape and joint neatly. And finally, always wear appropriate safety gear. Dust mask is essential as cutting plasterboard creates fine dust. Goggles will protect your eyes and gloves can save your hands from nicks and scrapes. Safety first, always. So there you have it, dry lining demystified. It might have seemed like a complicated builder-only job before, but hopefully you can now see it's a pretty straightforward system. From understanding what it is, essentially using plasterboards to create smooth internal surfaces quickly, to knowing a bit about its history and how those boards are made, you're well on your way. We've looked at the different types of boards available, from your standard everyday hero to the specialized ones for tackling moisture, fire and sound. So you know there's a board for pretty much every situation you might encounter in your home. Comparing the boards, you can now make informed choices based on your project's specific needs and, of course, your budget. We've also touched on how to fix them, whether it's screwing to a stud frame or dotting and dabbing onto a solid wall, and the importance of good preparation. Remember, a good foundation makes for a good finish. Don't rush the prep work. Make sure your framing is sound and your measurements are accurate. It's all about taking your time and thinking the job through step by step, just like any other successful DIY project. My biggest piece of advice for any beginner wanting to have a go at dry lining is don't be afraid to start small. Perhaps try dry lining a small section of wall in a utility room or a garage first to build your confidence. Watch plenty of videos online. There are loads of great tutorials out there, and invest in a few decent tools. They don't have to be top of the range, but good tools make any job easier and safer. A proper drywall saw, a good Stanley knife, a T-square, and a cordless drill or driver with a drywall screw bit will be invaluable. And remember, everyone makes mistakes when they're learning. The key is to learn from them. If a cut isn't quite right or a screw goes too deep, don't panic. Analyze what went wrong and try again. The beauty of plasterboard is that it's relatively forgiving, and most minor mistakes can be rectified with a bit of filler or careful jointing. So get stuck in, have a go, and you'll soon be creating beautifully smooth walls and ceilings like a pro. Good luck with your dry lining adventures. You've got this.